You're listening to the Second Look podcast, where we take a closer look at what we're learning each Sunday at Connection Church to help you grow in your walk with Christ. Here are your hosts, Pastor Joe Terreri and Pastor Dan DeRochers.
Welcome to The Second Look. My name is Dan.
And I'm Joe.
And we're here talking about From Grind to Glory.
What a title.
A podcast that may eclipse the sermon. But first, hey, Joe.
Good morning, Dan. Happy Eclipse Day.
And also to you.
Thank you.
Joe, I have a question regarding the eclipse and the workplace. If an employee...
Yes.
Because you're a boss.
I am a boss.
If an employee steps outside...
Today?
This very afternoon.
At the place where I'm the boss?
Yes.
Okay.
To put on a pair of glasses provided by one of two employees.
Wow.
Who brought in eclipse glasses
because this
today.
Workplace is not providing eclipse glasses.
No.
We don't got money or time for that.
We did not think of it.
No. No, we didn't.
I mean, should that employee sitting across, I mean, do I need to make up the time?
Yeah, so everyone from Connection Church, let's be specific, who goes out to watch the eclipse, for every minute spent, there's going to be another minute required. Like, you have to double the time you're out there. So, like, let's just say you watch the eclipse from 2:15 to 2:25.
You'll miss it. Yeah, I mean, it's well before it's actually happening.
What
so
time's
you
the eclipse?
didn't read any of the news reports or the notifications that you got from your... Sorry.
No, that's okay. What
Joe,
time's the eclipse?
Will you be going out at 2:15 to watch the eclipse?
What time's the eclipse at?
You're going to be disappointed.
Yeah. What time's the eclipse?
It's 3:28 to 3:30, something like that.
Oh, yeah. Dan, let me just
We're not in the path of totality.
Let me just be honest.
It's going to be overcast. Please go, Joe.
You can
Be
do
honest.
whatever you want at that point. All right, by 3:30, I mean, it's fine.
I was thinking we might need to put in a time clock if
Yeah.
we're going to do that. Because
I want everyone to punch in and punch out in order to watch the eclipse.
I'd like to punch something out. Joe.
Yes, Dan.
We're talking about work.
We are. That's what we're doing right now. Can you believe that this is part of our work?
I know most people wouldn't believe, John, this is work. And Joe.
Yes.
I didn't really realize until yesterday when you mentioned it that we spend...
Oh, that pastoral ministry is a job? Oh, sorry. Keep going.
We spend much of our life asleep.
Yes.
And we spend just as much or more time in our life working.
I know. Isn't that depressing? You're either unconscious or you're working.
And it's like...
With a few hours of fun sprinkled in occasionally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
this is why we love eating so much.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's third.
Yeah, the fun part, yeah.
But, man, we spent a lot of time at work. And the other thing that I hadn't really thought about much before is that work existed before the fall.
Yes.
Right? So we see so many examples in Scripture that work happened in a perfect world. God exemplified to us that work is something that He does and did. And that was a very interesting way to start this conversation of like, yeah, work is godly, but we also live in a situation where work is toil.
Yeah. I mean, you might say that the fall has eclipsed the goodness of work. Hey, all right, that's it. If we're not, I would tune out at this point. I would turn it off. I'd listen to Joe Rogan at this point. No, so yes. So I think it's so important to see the goodness of work because I think it speaks to that God sees that we have meaning and purpose through our work. Now, we have to be very careful when using words like meaning and purpose and attaching them to work because too many of us attach our identity to our work and we are so easily like, who I am is what I do. And so this is a very nuanced and delicate conversation because our work and the goodness of work does bring meaning and purpose to our lives. Another way we might say that is it gets us out of bed in the morning. It gives us something good to do. And we all know what it's like after a good day of work. You know, you've accomplished something, you've worked hard, and then you get home and you're like, you know what? That was a good day. Like something happens psychologically, internally for us. And this happens to people who love Jesus Christ and people who don't love Jesus. This is a part of God's common grace that work does provide satisfaction. And there is a sense where work is very good, and it was very good, created by God. And yet there's the other side of it. When sin enters the world, that work has this grind aspect to it. That's why it's called the grind.
Some people have the opportunity to have jobs where they do find great meaning. And I want to sort of separate that from identity.
Sure.
But we have a job that has great meaning.
Yes.
Some people don't.
Right.
Some people might enjoy the thing that they do. Some people may not enjoy the thing that they do. Some people might be searching for their whole lives for work that brings them purpose and work that fulfills them.
Yeah.
Is that something that's a good thing to pursue? Like, how do we put ourselves in the right frame of mind around what our work should contribute to our lives?
Well, I think it's really easy, and Tim Keller pointed this out, so this idea is not original with me. He said that people in helping professions, so people maybe in the medical field or people like you and I who are in a helping profession, it's easy for us to feel like our jobs are superior to people who might do things that just are like only connected to wealth building, right? I would say that's a wrong view of work. So yes, there are jobs that people do where they do have a great sense of meaning and purpose, but then there's jobs that just need to get done, like cutting grass and digging ditches. And if you live in New Jersey, pumping gas, and there's lots of sales jobs, there's lots of tech jobs. There's a lot of jobs that are like, hey, it's only about the bottom line of our company, so we're selling things in order to increase profits, and the people at the top get wealthy, and so there's no perfect work though. And so I think that we need to understand that what we read in Scripture is that because we're made in the image of God, most work is very dignified. And I say most work and we don't need to go through them here, but there's probably examples.
I brought a list.
Yeah. No, there's some work that is actually doesn't have any dignity attached to it. And as God's people, we shouldn't get involved in work like that. We probably shouldn't be a bookie, right? Like, we'll just say that, like, that's not good, dignifying work, taking advantage of people and beating them up if they don't pay their bills. So, but I do think that what we see is that no matter what our job is, all kinds of work that we have can be turned into worship and done for the glory of God.
So what we do is worship, right? And what makes it that is our heart. We talk so much all the time about our attitude and the condition of our heart.
Yes.
So if we do something that we don't particularly love or find a ton of meaning out of, I mean, how do we reconcile that in our own lives of like, I'm doing a job, I guess it's fine, it provides for my family, but I don't know that this is me. Like, how do we reconcile that?
I have two thoughts about that. Number one, just because we're supposed to turn our work into worship doesn't mean we're supposed to stay at our jobs if we hate them.
Yeah,
like,
that's good.
Like, I do think we have the freedom to go and find a job that we might enjoy more than the job we have now. And at the same time, we are responsible to provide for those around us. So that's always a tension. But I think there's a second thing that's actually a really interesting thing for us just to kind of consider. When we have a job that actually doesn't help us to experience purpose and meaning and kind of what you're touching on, it's like, hey, it's just a job, it's a paycheck. I don't really love it. I don't really find meaning in it. Well, here's a great thing to know, that maybe where you earn your paycheck isn't where God is providing purpose in your life.
That's good.
That there are other outlets that God gives us to find purpose. And this is the beauty of ministry. This is the beauty of the body of Christ, that we may work our jobs 9 to 5 to earn a living, but then God shows us that we have other giftings that may not translate into money, but do translate into blessing for other people, where we serve other people. And that actually does fill us with a sense of meaning and purpose. And so, yes, we want to do our work to the glory of God, but then if that's not really the place where we find meaning, that doesn't that's not where you're constrained to spend all of your time. And so I think that God, if we have gifts that don't necessarily translate into money making, we can use those gifts in the church, we can use them in the community, we can use them in our families. And so this is the beauty of work. Everywhere we turn around, there's work to be done. There's work to be done at our jobs, there's work to be done at home, there's work to be done at church. And God is working with us through all of those things. And I think what I'm really trying to say is we need to detach our idea of work and income, because there are times where our work and our income won't match.
Yeah.
Meaning what we really find joy in doing, we won't get paid for. And that's okay. I mean, I see some people at our church, Dan, who serve God with such passion, and they're not pumped up about their job, but they're able to express another passion. And yes, they may not get paid for it, but how good is God that he helps them to find meaning and purpose in that. And I'm also not saying that it has to be spiritual and within the four walls of the church for it to have meaning and value. I hope I was clear about that yesterday.
Yeah. Can we talk about what it's like to be a follower of Jesus in a corporate or otherwise work environment that's filled with people who are not followers of Jesus?
Yeah.
How would you approach that? What's our role as Christians? How can we be, to use a Christian term, how can we be salt and light in the workplace?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I would say I haven't been in the workplace like that in quite a long time, but I have a lot of friendships and I have a lot of people that I talk to. So here's some things that come to my mind. Number one is the word advantage. If you are in a quote, secular environment and you love Jesus Christ, you have an advantage. And you're like, what's the advantage? Every day you go to work and there is a mission field there. Not saying that people are projects, but you literally get to shine Jesus's light in the place where he has placed you. So every day you get out of bed and there is an inherent purpose, whether you love the work or not, that you get to show people Jesus Christ. And I consider that where I'm at in my life as a great advantage. And one of the downsides of church work is that you go to work with Christians every day. You're always around Christians. And by the way, I love God's people and I love the people I work with a lot. I mean that sincerely. I love coming here to work every day. But everyone here knows Jesus, praise his name. But, I think that there's this sense when we get to go to these spaces where there's people far from God, what a beautiful gift from the Lord. So I think there's an advantage there. Here's the other side of it. There's also darkness.
Yeah.
And I know that in the corporate world, sometimes the only thing that, and this is just from my anecdotal conversations with people, the only thing that matters is money. And I'm not saying that's every corporation, but it's just everything is just so productivity, bottom line oriented. And I would say, so there's some darkness in that. And so not losing your soul in that means that you have to stay close to Jesus, you have to prioritize your relationship with him, and you may need to make hard calls about what you feel conviction about as a follower of Jesus. And I'm not saying that happens all the time, but those situations do come up. And I think you see the brokenness of the world, and it's not that we don't see the brokenness of the world in our environment here at the church. We do all the time. We're all imperfect people. But I do think there's an advantage, and I do think there's darkness, and so what a beautiful opportunity we have to be salt and light in our workplaces and to really think, and I think this thought really helps, God has placed me in this job to be his ambassador in this space to the people who are here. And I can be an ambassador for Christ by how I speak, my attitude, how I do my job and my work ethic, and how I treat the people around me. You can shine for Christ in that way. And then the Lord, will give you opportunity to explicitly share the gospel in time.
What about in environments where we are around things that may be unethical or immoral, or we're being asked to participate in things that might be unethical or immoral?
Yeah, I don't think that's a really tough decision. It's only tough when money gets involved, but I think that sometimes I find myself being like, oh man, I have this really tough decision I have to make, or, recently I had something I kind of walked through where I'm like, okay, am I going to do the right thing? And I thought about it for about 10 minutes because there was money involved. And I'm like,
No, I'm going to renew my registration.
Stop. No, but it was just something where, yeah, I don't want to go into the whole situation, but I was just like, oh, of course I'm going to do, like, of course, like, and it wasn't a black and white moment, by the way. It wasn't about morality, but my point in saying that is if we really just run every decision through the lens of what does it look like to please Jesus Christ in this moment, those, quote, tough decisions actually get very simple. Now, I'm a very bottom line guy, and I'm not saying that you should just quit. What I am saying is I think you should have a conversation with your supervisor that goes something like this. If you ask me to do this, I actually have that goes against my conscience.
Yeah.
Like, there's something in me, and you don't need to put it in spiritual language. You can just say, I don't feel right about this, and I'm unwilling to do it. I just want you to know that. And if your supervisor says, you do it, or there's the door, okay. I think that's a moment to live by faith.
That's good.
Now, we need to be very careful about what we say we're uncomfortable with, because sometimes we say we're uncomfortable with things and it's more gray, but there are things that, like stealing, lying, just running through the grid of the 10 commandments. If I do this, am I breaking a commandment? And usually what you're kind of probably referring to is when we're being asked to steal or lie, or a combination of both.
Yeah. Have you heard the term quiet quitting?
Yes.
How do you feel about quiet quitting, right? To kind of do the bare minimum. Some people would put it more in terms of, well, I'm just establishing a good work-life balance. Mm-hmm. I feel like this is an sort of an attitude thing, right?
Yeah.
Our approach to work, like, yeah, I'm gonna just do enough to skate by at work. Like, how do we process this idea of, like, I don't want to be taken advantage of,
right?
And have work-life balance. I don't know if I love the corporate hustle culture where I'm working versus, like, could the actions be the same but be in line kind of with what Jesus would want for our lives?
I think it goes down to motive, because I would say that there's probably such a nuanced answer to that, because some people might quiet quit because their company is asking for way more than they have the right to ask for from one of their workers, right? So that's why I was very clear in my message yesterday to say, worship is doing our best with the time and the energy that we have. Yeah. Because here's what we all know. In different seasons, our best is going to look different. And even in my own children, their best at school is all different. I mean, they're all very bright kids. I mean, I'm sure you're shocked to hear that. No, but they're all like for some of them, a solid B may be their best. But if one of them gets a B, it may be like, no, you should have got an A. Not because we're perfectionists, but because if you would have put the effort in, you would have got the A. And I think the same thing is true at work. We have limited time, we have limited capacity, and we have limited energy. And so when we work, we need to be giving our best with our capacity, time, and energy that we are able to give. Now, here's the dark side of quiet quitting. Is it an act of rebellion against authority? Because I think sometimes, and I think this could be generational, I think sometimes we think that we have the right to define terms about what we're willing and unwilling to do in a job based on our own subjective standards. Yeah. And so I think as God's people, we need to have a very clear mind around, okay, when I take a job and it's clear what the requirements are, I am making an agreement. I am giving my word that I am willing to receive this amount of money for this work. Now, if more work is added to that job description, I think it's okay to say hey, you hired me to do this. Now you're asking me to do this, this, and this. And I think those conversations are important in the workplace. But just to stop working hard, I think is incredibly ungodly. That's why we need to be people who speak up. It's not ungodly to have a conversation with your supervisor. It's Not ungodly to say, hey, you're asking for more than you're paying me to do. That's okay to do, because we don't say as God's people, yes, take advantage of us. We're Christians. I don't think that's godly at all. Jesus has not asked you to be a doormat. So I think that that's a very nuanced conversation, but I think it comes down to the motives of our heart. And listen, in every job, you want people to be a team player. You want them to get the job done. In work like we have, Dan, here, we all know this. There's seasons that are really intense, and then there's seasons where it's like, no, there's not as much to do. There's seasons where 55 hours a week is required, and there's seasons where 40 hours is more than enough to get all the work done. But I think that you have to have open dialogue with your supervisors. And listen, I understand that may not be possible for everybody. And so I think this is why me answering this question on a podcast is not actually what everyone needs. What everyone needs is discernment. You need to pray about it, and you need to ask, Lord, what are you teaching me through this? How do I need to respond to this maybe overwork request? I want to give my best, Lord, but this is killing my family. That's why all of this just takes wisdom, discernment, and the leadership of the Holy Spirit. So that's my real answer. Submit to this, walk with God through these things.
Joe, when you hired me, this podcast was not part of my job description.
It's weird.
So I figured now would be a good time.
Back in 2007 when they hired me, it wasn't either. So maybe we should talk to our supervisors.
Let's take it up with the elders.
Yeah.
Here's the good news. We have been putting in the bare minimum on this podcast since day one. So totally fine. And this has been another episode of The Second Look. You can catch this sermon and much more at our website, cometoconnect.com. Have a great week.